Hi! So today we are going to do a code review of the stars repository by Viet A. Dang. Now this project is a static website, which is beautifully done. I think this is a very good landing page for any business. You have big hero images, which is always nice to set the mood, and then you have well-structured rest of the page with some small forms to make a reservation, which is always good to have some kind of CTA for your page, and so on and so forth. You even have very high quality looking images of your foods, so really nice job there. But that's not what we're going to concentrate on today. Today we are going to look at the code. So the first thing I notice is that you have dist folder, which probably includes some of the bundled files, like JavaScripts. Now this can be considered as a code smell. You never should commit anything like this in your master branch. I can see that you are using github.io, so the GitHub's own hosting platform. But even then, I would use something like GHPages plugin to handle the dirty work, so we don't need to pollute our master branch. Because what you'll end up doing, when you make any changes, you'll need to rebuild your dist folder and then commit the folder again. And that creates unnecessary commits that pollute our version control. And we don't want that, do we? So let's just get rid of the dist folder altogether and use a plugin like GHPages, or in this situation, when you are using Gulp, you could be even using Gulp GHPages plugin for deploying. Now, a word about Gulp. Gulp is a pretty old tool to be building and bundling this kind of sites. Because this is a straightforward website, which is a static one, I would be using, or my go-to tool would be to use Parcel on this. Now Parcel works really beautifully on this kind of small static websites. You just point it to your index.html file, and it pretty much knows what you want to do after that. If we look at the documentation, it has ready-made plugins for common things like CSS or SCSS or JavaScript. So basically everything you would want from this project. But nevertheless, if Gulp is a tool that you already know how to use, then go with it. It's okay. Let's have a look at the Gulp file then. The first thing I notice is that you are using some artisanal whitespace, so to speak. So you are using much of your time and effort to handle your whitespace in your imports. I think this is just a waste of time nowadays, where you have tools like Prettier that just can do the dirty work for you, and you don't need to manage the whitespace at all. Another issue with custom whitespace is that if you would, for example, remove the auto prefixer from this import list, then you would be having unnecessarily big whitespace here. You would end up doing commits that change all of these files just to get one import out of the system. So not good. I would just install Prettier and get done with it. Next, let's look at the default Gulp task. So the default Gulp task runs when you run Gulp without any arguments. And that's usually the one that you configure the first. That would be the main task of your Gulp file. And that's usually what you run when you start up the project in the dev mode. Now I can see that it's only running one job, and it's called watch SAS. And I find it weird that we also have a watch.js task, which is not ran as a part of the default one. And if we look at the readme.md file, we can sure see why. You expect me to open 3 different terminal windows and to run all of these processes just to get started with the project. I probably won't be doing that. What instead you should be doing is that you should configure so that your default task runs all of these 3 tasks. And I'm guessing that this wasn't possible because you are using gulp.series. Now this gulp.series runs tasks one by one, but if you run a watcher inside the series task, then it won't ever complete. because it's a watcher. It just keeps on watching files until you quit the program. So what you should be using instead is something called gulp.parallel. If you used gulp.parallel, then you would be just listing your watch.js here, and then it would run those automatically. With gulp tasks though, the ordering is significant if you're not using watchers. So I would place this as the last task in this file. Then we could even run the images as a part of this task. In addition to that, I would do a separate build task that you would run before you deploy. So that task should take images, JavaScript, and Sass tasks, and then run them all one by one. And because they are not dependent on each other, you can again use the gulp.parallel. That makes it even faster to build your files. One thing I'm noticing here is that you are not copying your index.html file to your dist folder. So we can only see things like CSS here, but no index.html. So I usually copy everything over to the dist folder, so the dist folder can be deployed as it is to a static web host. Now the last point comes from using of comments. So you're using comments to do abstractions in your files, I think. But most of the time, I think your comments are just noise. Let me tell you why. So for example here, you have multi-line comment just to describe that you are starting to do a gulp task. Even though the gulp task does only one thing, you're still using an index here. And then what you say inside your comment is that you watch Sass files for changes. Then you run a gulp task which is called watch Sass, and then you say gulp.watch Sass files and then run Sass task. Now I think this is enough repetition, so we can probably discard the comments. The same applies also to your index.html file. For example, let's scroll all the way down to the footer. So you have a comment where you describe that you are now beginning to do a footer, an abstraction, so to speak. But then you have a tag called footer with a class called footer. I think this is also enough repetition, so we can just safely discard the comments. The last nitpick I have for you today is that if we look at the images, you saw the beautiful hero image as the first thing when we opened up the website. But if we go and look at the image under the landing and deck, this is a huge beast that we are looking now. So if you look at the image, it takes 800 kilobytes as it is. Now you did have a gulp task for minifying the images or optimizing them, but still you are loading this image as it is in the mobile. And I think that's just a pure waste of precious kilobytes, especially on mobile network. Now what I would do instead is that I would take some gulp plugin and then add one extra step to your images gulp task, right around here. That would automatically scale down your images into mobile sizes. And then you could reference to those images in your mobile website. So you could be using either CSS or the image tag, whatever you want. But just make sure that you won't be downloading that big images on the mobile device, especially on that kind of image-heavy website. Okay, that's all I have for you today. If you have any comments, even if you disagree with me, please leave a comment to this YouTube channel, because I love to be wrong and I love to learn more. If you like this video, please subscribe. Thank you for watching and happy coding!